in other news, Ukraine's Air Force says the eastern city of Dnipro has been targeted by a Russian intercontinental ballistic missile. It's the first time, assuming it happened, a weapon of such power has been used in the 1,000 days of the Ukraine war, and indeed in any armed conflict until today, if reports from Ukraine are correct. They have a range of more than 5,000 kilometers and can carry nuclear warheads. Ukraine says Russia fired it without a nuclear payload. It says the area was also targeted by a hypersonic ballistic missile and 7 cruise missiles. The ICBM was launched from the Russian region around the Caspian Sea. It comes after Ukraine used US and British long-range missiles to strike targets inside Russia. Meanwhile, the Biden administration has announced almost $300 million of new military assistance for Ukraine as it bolsters support for Kyiv in the last few weeks in office. The package includes ammunition, missiles, drones, and anti-personnel landmines. The previously announced decision to supply the mines has been criticized by activists because of their danger to civilians, but U.S. officials say they contain safety features. President Zelensky has welcomed the move.
U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin announced Wednesday that the U.S. is going to provide Ukraine anti-personnel mines.
Well, for more on the latest developments around Ukraine, I'm joined now on the line from London by the European Affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Dr. Laskiewicz. Let's start with that report that came out earlier today that Russia has fired an intercontinental ballistic missile at the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. According to the Ukrainians, it's the first time that a weapon of such power has been used. How serious a development is this, if confirmed?
If confirmed, it is extremely serious for 3 reasons. First and foremost, as you say, it has never been used in ICBM at all, and not in this war or ever. So in itself, it will be an escalation. Number 2, the point is that it would show that the Western, if you like, long-range missiles can be trumped by another missile, the implication there being that the Russian missiles are bigger than the Ukrainian and better than Ukrainian missiles, of course. But that's nothing compared to the third point. There is some doubt whether it was actually fired or not, and somebody has, experts have stated that it's unlikely because it's an extremely expensive way of delivering a non-nuclear warhead, which is comparatively small, as I've stated, in comparison to a huge air attack, for example. However, that's to miss the point, which is it could be just a test run. It is stated by President Putin over again and by his media that Russia will retaliate for the use of Western missiles deep into Russia. It follows that they were perhaps merely testing the ICBM. Certainly, at present, we cannot be certain it has happened, but if it has, it would be very serious indeed.
And of course, the background to this, which you touched on there, is that Ukraine has for the first time used US-made ATACMS missiles and British Storm Shadow cruise weapons against targets inside Russia. And of course, Russia promised a response. So as you said, this could well be that response. Nevertheless, it is fair to say that by targeting Dnipro, this is not yet a full-scale Russian reprisal, because if it was, then they presumably would have targeted Kyiv. So in that regard, this appears to be a more calibrated escalation by Moscow, a warning in effect, rather than a full-scale reprisal. I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Quite right. It will be a warning and also be a test run. Please remember, test runs are also important. And the point about it is that it is, as you also said, it is not the actual retaliation. The retaliation is yet to come. And that's the worrying feature. What he has done is tested new missiles against Ukraine as well. and of course, as a result, has made some effect. But that's not what he said he would do, and therefore we are still waiting. It is, as you rightly state, not the end of this story.
And as that story continues to unfold, what do you think will happen once Mr. Biden is gone and Mr. Trump comes in?
Well, unfortunately, just before President Biden left, he scaled up two things, which were one of which, of course, was the missiles into Russia. The other are the anti-personnel mines. So the situation has somewhat gotten worse in the last few weeks. However, what is quite clear is that everyone's now waiting for, as you say, President Trump to come in. And therefore, what will he do? And this is where we have a huge mystery. He has stated that he could finish the war in 24 hours. But there are two aspects to this. Even if he were to cut aid to Ukraine, they could carry on for a while. And number two, Russia has already adopted a somewhat tough negotiating stance. Not only are they pressing forward in the military side, but also they made it quite clear by not welcoming Trump to the presidency immediately and by the various statements that they do not intend simply to settle for the first offer. So therefore, I very much doubt he can finish it in 24 hours. And rather, the point will be that the war at least will perhaps have some sort of end, but it will not be quick.
Absolutely. And of course, as you said, over the next few months, it's expected that Donald Trump will try to start negotiations with Russia. We know that Ukraine wants reparations and its territory back, and that Russia wants to keep that territory. Is that what would be seen as success by either side?
I'm afraid the definition of success for either side is virtually mutually exclusive. What really Russia wants is to conquer the whole of Ukraine, but it will settle for that territory. What Ukraine wants is to have the Russians out altogether and reparations. There's no real middle ground there, and therefore the success will be if Russia has any territory at all, it will portray this as a success, and it will be rather, it should be done by the West, by Donald Trump, to portray it differently as a compromise. Otherwise, there will indeed be a problem in this respect. But in any case, President Zelensky is showing no signs of wanting to do any sort of compromise, whereupon Donald Trump's actual options will be limited merely to cutting off aid, which will have an effect, but is by no means rapid.
So basically, what Ukraine wants and what Russia wants are totally incompatible. What do you reckon the US wants out of a negotiated settlement with Russia? Or will that be defined only after Donald Trump takes office?
Yes, because Biden made it quite clear he supported Ukraine's demands. So the US demands chimed in entirely with the Ukrainian ones. However, what Donald Trump wants, is what the Republican wants, is an end to the war, period. At what terms? It's unclear. But he's certainly flexible. He certainly is quite prepared to see that some territory is ceded. And this has been done by a series of trial balloons where some of his aides or people that he can deniability give him, because there was one person who was a sort of contractor. And they're already hinting at this point. So it's quite clear that the treaty will be, from the USA's point of view, the goal is the end of the war. They're not really too concerned about the territorial aspect, which, of course, is precisely what Ukraine does not want. So quite how they're going to achieve it is an interesting question.
Well, that's a big question, and you're the analyst, so I'm going to push it your way. I mean, President Trump is in the difficult position, as you mentioned earlier, of having promised the world that he would end the war very quickly. Do you think he can?
I do not believe it's possible to end it quickly, because I do not believe that Zelensky would agree to any sort of peace immediately. And it's by no means clear Russia would either, because they have strengthened their negotiating stance with all these victories that they're slowly, each day brings them more successes. They've even incidentally, of course, recovered a huge area of the Kursk incursion. And if they manage to clear the Ukrainians out of the Kursk incursion, that really will be seen as Ukraine's on the run. And therefore, Russian negotiating stance will certainly harden up. However, if you're putting me on the spot and say, yes, I believe that he will threaten to cut off aid to Ukraine. I believe as a result he will insist upon territorial concessions. I think that something along these lines will probably occur because Ukraine without America really can't survive. However, it would not be in 24 hours, more like 24 weeks at the best. That is to say, it'll probably take a good few months for it to finally be negotiated through. Please note that the Ukraine war is in itself quite possibly only the start. It is a minor point, of course, but the Russians decided to pass a bill no longer recognizing Lithuania's independence. It does point out that Russia's ambitions are by no means limited by this war, and I think we should now start considering this aspect, because if there is a possibility of ending this war, this does not mean that all wars will disappear.
That's a very good point. And before we let you go, just as they say, back to the present, the war, of course, with Ukraine still continuing, and the latest, of course, being this Ukrainian announcement that the Russians have fired an intercontinental ballistic missile. What do you think will happen now? Is it possible that that might be, as we suggested earlier, a warning to Ukraine, and that Ukraine might now stay its hand in terms of using those American and British long-range missiles and those mines that have been given to them?
I doubt it, because you see, the ICBM is simply just another missile. It's got a long range, of course, but it is just another missile. I don't believe it will stop Ukraine. Rather, the question is, will Putin carry out his threat of attacking those countries who are supplying the weapons, or NATO countries in general? In this case, the countries which are being threatened would be rather England, Great Britain to be more accurate, than, of course, the USA, because to strike the USA really would provoke a very dangerous situation. But far more to the point, it may be an attack on a NATO country like Poland, which Russia has been threatening on and off now for all these years of the war. So it's by no means clear that the strike on Ukraine is not, in fact, a test run for a strike elsewhere.
Thank you, Dr. Laskiewicz. We appreciate your assessment. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz is the European Affairs Analyst. He was talking to me on the line there from London.